This is the true-to-life story of George Afrika Akinyemi Awilade, a courageous student of Obafemi Awolowo University in 1999 who devoted his entire academic life to fighting campus cultism. Known for his intellect, integrity, and love for African culture, symbolized by his constant native attire, Afrika became a fearless leader and activist who organized students to resist the influence of the Black Axe Confraternity. His bravery, however, made him a target. One tragic night, cult members stormed his hostel and took his life, silencing a voice that had dared to challenge their power. Though the system failed to deliver justice, Afrika's story evolved into a timeless symbol of courage, sacrifice, and moral resistance. I've learned a lot in my research about heroes, especially those who stand up to real darkness. The story of George Akinyemi Awilade, known to everyone as Afrika, is one that shows what true bravery looks like, even when facing terrible evil. It's a story set in a time that was, in many ways, scarier than now. Obafemi Awolowo University in 1999. This wasn't just any university. Obafemi Awolowo University was a place of great learning, but also a battlefield in a hidden fight against cultism. And in the middle of that conflict stood Afrika. George Akinyemi Awilade was a student at Obafemi Awolowo University in the 1990s. But very few people called him George. Everyone on campus knew him as Afrika. Why Afrika? Because he loved his culture deeply. He always wore native attire. While other students might wear Western clothes, Afrika would be seen in beautiful, flowing igbadas or well-made dashikis. He carried himself with a quiet pride in his heritage, and this made him stand out. But Afrika was much more than his clothes. His brain was incredibly smart and sharp. He wasn't just intelligent. He used his intelligence to understand the world around him, especially the big problem of cultism on campus. He was a thinker, a planner, and someone who truly understood the importance of protecting his fellow students. In a time when cultism was a dark cloud over Nigerian universities, Afrika was a bright light. He didn't just dislike cultism. He dedicated all his years and time to getting rid of it from Obafemi Awolowo University. This was a very dangerous thing to do, but Afrika was driven by a deep belief in a safe and peaceful campus. Many students and even some lecturers loved and respected him deeply. They saw his courage, his clear focus against cultism, and his unwavering belief that Obafemi Awolowo University could be free from fear. He was a symbol of hope for many, a voice that dared to speak out when others were too scared to even whisper. He was known for his calm, firm way of explaining why cultism was bad, not just for individuals but for the entire university community. He was never loud or aggressive in his arguments, but his words carried weight because they came from a place of deep intelligence and care. He truly believed in the power of students to change things for the better. But Obafemi Awolowo University in the 1990s was not a peaceful place. The cult groups, especially the Black Axe and Axe Confraternity, were strong and violent. They wanted to control everything through fear. Anyone who stood against them was taking a huge risk. Afrika knew this risk. He saw the threats, felt the tension, but he refused to back down. He believed that if students worked together, they could push back the darkness. He was beginning to organize, to plan, and to truly become a leader in the fight against campus violence. The stage was set for a terrible clash. On one side, the darkness of the Black Axe, seeking to rule through fear. On the other, Afrika, with his sharp mind and brave heart, gathering students under the banner of hope and safety. This was not just a university story. It was a story about courage fighting against overwhelming evil. In my recent research, I've seen that true leaders don't just wish for change. They make it happen. This was exactly what Afrika did at Obafemi Awolowo University in the 1990s. He understood that to go against the strong hand of cultism, students couldn't stay quiet and scared. They needed to unite. Afrika wasn't just a student who wore native clothes and looked smart. He was a doer. He started to reach out, quietly at first, to other students who felt the same way he did about cultism. He didn't just complain about the problem. He offered solutions. He began by organizing peaceful meetings. These were not loud protests but small gatherings in safe places, maybe a classroom after hours, or a quiet corner of the library. Here he would talk to students about the real danger of cultism. He explained how cult groups were not about brotherhood but about using and hurting people. He showed how they ruined lives, not just for the members but for their families and the whole campus. The power of togetherness. He taught students that their fear was what cults used to control them. But if they stood together, that fear would shrink. Afrika's words were powerful because he didn't speak with anger. He spoke with logic and care. He knew his facts, and he shared them clearly. He showed students official reports of cult violence, explained how cults often tricked new members, and shared stories of lives destroyed. These meetings grew. More and more students, tired of living in fear, started listening to Afrika. He didn't just talk, he got them involved. He started awareness campaigns. He encouraged students to create posters, simple messages explaining the dangers of cultism and urging students to resist. Share information, telling each other about suspicious activities or warning friends away from bad influences. Become watchdogs, paying attention to what was happening on campus and reporting small problems before they became big ones. Afrika made sure these actions were always peaceful and smart. He knew that fighting violence with violence was not the answer. His goal was to educate and empower students, making them strong from the inside. He became a very important part of the student union's anti-cult activities. He wasn't just a member. He was the one providing the ideas, the calm guidance, and the fearless spirit. Other student leaders looked to him for advice and courage. He was like a shepherd guiding his flock away from wolves. His intelligence helped him plan, and his courage helped him lead. He was building a wall of unity against the darkness of cultism, brick by brick, student by student. He had shown them that they were not alone, and that together they had a voice, and that voice was getting stronger. The cults would soon have to notice this growing light. As Afrika's anti-cult movement grew at Obafemi Awolowo University in the 1990s, it was only a matter of time before he would have to face the cults directly. My research shows that darkness doesn't like the light, and Afrika was shining a very bright light indeed. He didn't just talk about stopping cultism, he started to actively stand against it. Afrika began to put his plans into action. He was smart about it, but also very brave. He knew that to truly weaken cults, you had to stop their activities and protect their victims. He used his position and his growing network of brave students to report incidents. When he or other students heard about cult members intimidating someone or causing trouble, Afrika would ensure it was reported to the campus security. He wouldn't let things be swept under the rug. Advise victims. Students who had been threatened or extorted by cult members often came to Afrika. He listened carefully, gave them advice on how to get help, and sometimes even walked with them to campus security, making sure their voices were heard. He made them feel less alone and more powerful. Create safe spaces. Afrika worked with student leaders to ensure certain areas of the campus, like specific common rooms or study areas, were clearly marked as cult-free zones. He would personally monitor these areas, making his presence a silent warning to cultists. These actions were incredibly brave. Cult members didn't like being reported or having their victims helped. They wanted fear and silence. Afrika was breaking that silence. Because of his bold actions, Afrika quickly became a major problem for the lower-ranking cult members, especially those from the Black Axe Confraternity. They saw him as a direct obstacle to their power. They started to try and scare him. These were not full attacks yet, but clear warnings. Veiled warnings. Cult members would sometimes pass by Afrika, making eye contact, their faces cold and threatening. They might bump into him, by accident, in a crowded area. Whispered messages. Sometimes, a message would reach Afrika through another student, a warning to mind his business or slow down. These messages were designed to plant fear. Property damage. Once, Afrika returned to his room to find his door slightly damaged, or a small, unexplained mark on his personal belongings. These were small acts of intimidation, meant to show him that they knew where he lived and could get to him. But Afrika was not easily scared. He was intelligent. He understood these threats were meant to make him back down. Instead of getting scared, he used these incidents to show other students that the cults were feeling the pressure. He used them as examples in his meetings, showing how cults react when challenged, and how important it was not to give in to their fear tactics. His resolve only grew stronger. Every threat was a sign that he was succeeding. He became even more determined, a living shield for the students of Obafemi Awolowo University. He was preparing for a bigger fight, one that would truly test the strength of the unity he had built. My research often points to certain moments that truly define a hero. For Afrika at Obafemi Awolowo University in the 1990s, that moment came when he became instrumental in organizing students to arrest suspected members of the Black Axe Confraternity. This was not just a brave act, it was a powerful show of student unity against evil. The Black Axe had become too bold, causing too much trouble on campus. There was a particular incident where their actions were very clear and affected many students negatively, possibly an act of intimidation or a petty crime that everyone witnessed. Afrika saw this as an opportunity to finally push back hard. He knew that campus security alone, or the police, sometimes struggled to identify cult members because they operated secretly. But the students knew. They saw who spent time with whom, who acted with unusual power, and who carried out the threats. Afrika's plan was simple but daring: empower the students to act. He called together his core group of anti-cult activists and explained his strategy. They would identify known Black Axe members and other groups, especially those responsible for recent incidents. Then, at a planned moment, they would mobilize a large group of students to surround and physically stop these cultists, holding them until campus security or the police could arrive. This was incredibly dangerous. It was a direct challenge, not just to the cultists, but to their fear-based control. The day of the operation was filled with tension. Afrika moved calmly through the campus, gathering students. He spoke with a quiet confidence that inspired courage. Students, numbering in the dozens, perhaps even hundreds for a coordinated effort, joined him. They identified their targets, suspected Black Axe members who were going about their daily activities, perhaps unaware they were being watched. Afrika gave the signal. Suddenly, a wave of students, led by Afrika's unwavering presence, moved forward. They converged on the cultists. It wasn't a riot. It was an organized, focused effort to physically contain the suspected cult members. Students, many of whom had lived in fear, now stood tall, using their numbers to overpower individuals who relied on intimidation. It was a powerful sight. Young men and women, who once whispered their fears, now standing firm, acting as a human wall against the cultists. The suspected Black Axe members were completely surprised. They tried to resist, but they were no match for the sheer numbers of united students. Afrika made sure that the cultists were held securely but without unnecessary violence from the students. He quickly called in campus security, who, seeing the clear evidence and the massive student support, had no choice but to arrest the apprehended cultists. This act was a huge victory for the students of Obafemi Awolowo University. It showed that cultists were not untouchable. It proved that unity and courage could defeat fear. Campus security had arrested several key cult members, thanks entirely to Afrika's leadership and the bravery of the students he organized. Afrika became more than just a leader. He was now a symbol of courage that everyone on campus recognized. He had shown that the students could fight back, and that they could win. But such a public, humiliating defeat would not be forgotten by the Black Axe. This victory, while glorious, marked him as their deadliest enemy. The cost of such courage would soon demand a heavy price. My research into cult dynamics always highlights a critical point. A direct challenge to their power is never met with silence. In the previous event, where Afrika bravely led students to arrest members of the Black Axe Confraternity at Obafemi Awolowo University, were not just a campus victory. They were a profound humiliation for the cult. And humiliation, for such groups, demands revenge. The campus, which had just felt a glimmer of hope, now unknowingly braced itself for a storm. The Black Axe leadership and its remaining members were utterly incandescent with rage. The sight of their number one and other members being surrounded by ordinary students, humiliated, and then handed over to campus security, played over and over in their minds like a twisted, unbearable film. This wasn't just a defeat, it was a public mocking of their core principle, dominance through absolute fear. Their carefully built reputation, which relied on students believing they were untouchable, had been shattered by one man. Whispers of their fury spread across campus like wildfire, but these were not merely rumors, they were portents. Students who had cheered Afrika's courage now felt a cold dread creeping in. They knew the Black Axe would not let this pass. Meetings of the confraternity, usually held in shadowy, secluded parts of the campus or off-campus hideouts, became intense, feverish gatherings. The normal debates about strategy were replaced by a single, burning demand: revenge. And the target was clear, emblazoned in their minds like a burning brand: Afrika. His very name, once a symbol of hope, was now uttered by cultists with venom, a curse, a promise of pain. They saw him not as a student leader, but as an existential threat. He had dared to show the other sheep that the wolves could be caught, and for that, he could not be allowed to live. His continued existence was an insult to their very identity, a crack in the foundation of their power. In the days and weeks following the arrests, the atmosphere on campus shifted from cautious optimism to a heavy, suffocating tension. The air itself seemed to hum with unspoken threats. Afrika, with his keen intelligence, recognized these signs immediately. He knew the fight was far from over. In fact, it had just begun in earnest. The threats against him became less subtle and more menacing. He would occasionally find crude drawings or messages scrawled on walls near his usual routes, symbols associated with the Black Axe, often accompanied by cryptic warnings. Sometimes, small groups of cult members would deliberately cross his path, their eyes narrowed, their faces fixed in expressions of pure malice. They wouldn't speak, but their silent glares spoke volumes, promising retribution. Students close to Afrika also started receiving warnings. Some were told to distance themselves from him, or face consequences. Others had their hostel rooms tampered with, a clear message that no one was truly safe. These were calculated acts of psychological warfare, designed to isolate Afrika, to make him feel vulnerable, and to erode the network of support he had so painstakingly built. The goal was to sow doubt and fear, to make students question whether standing with Afrika was worth the risk. Yet, Afrika himself remained remarkably composed. He understood the tactics. He advised his fellow students to remain vigilant but not to panic. He conveyed to them that fear was the cult's most potent weapon, and if they let it consume them, the Black Axe would truly win. His quiet strength, his unyielding gaze, and his logical explanations helped to steady the nerves of many, though the pressure was immense. The Black Axe made it clear, through every unspoken threat and every intimidating glance, that their primary unwavering target was Afrika. Their previous efforts at intimidation had been child's play compared to the furious resolve that now consumed them. They weren't just seeking to scare him away, they were seeking to execute him. His destruction became their singular, burning agenda. The cult's internal communications, though carefully guarded, spoke of teaching a lesson that would reverberate across all Nigerian universities, a statement that no one dared defy the Black Axe. They were meticulously planning their response, not a hurried act of anger, but a calculated, decisive blow designed to reclaim their lost honor and re-establish their absolute dominion. Afrika was aware of this deep-seated desire for revenge. He could feel the eyes watching him, the shadows lengthening around him. His every move was now under scrutiny, every plan he made potentially compromised. The campus, which he had fought so hard to free, now felt like a cage, with predators circling. But even as the danger grew, Afrika's spirit remained unbroken. He continued his work, strengthened by the knowledge that his actions had truly shaken the foundations of cult power. He was a marked man, but his resolve, born of his dedication to Obafemi Awolowo University and its students, was a shield more potent than any weapon. The stage was now set for the ultimate test of his courage. The cult's threats became bigger and clearer. Afrika daily life on campus was now a mix of going to classes and always being on guard. His smart mind told him he was now a marked man. He could feel that the cult was watching him. His friends and other students who fought cultism told him to be careful. They even asked him to hide for a while. They were very worried for him, saying he was pushing too hard, and the danger was too great. Afrika listened to their worries. He was patient and calm, which helped his friends feel a little less scared. He knew the danger was real. But he also explained to them that if he hid, if he let fear win, it would be the biggest victory for the cult. He said it would send a message that if you scare people enough, they will stop fighting. He told them that all their hard work to free the campus would be for nothing. He made it clear that letting fear win was something he would never do. His strong belief in a campus free from cults was much bigger than any fear he felt for himself. He told them that if they all stayed brave, even when it was scary, their courage would be their best weapon. He kept doing his normal student activities. He went to his classes, studied in the library, and walked around campus. But he was always watching. His sharp mind made him notice everything: new faces, strange groups of people, and anything that seemed out of place. He never looked scared on the outside. This calm way of being both inspired and worried the people around him. He was like a bright light in the dark, but the darkness was getting closer. Afrika didn't just stand there and wait. He worked even harder to make the student groups against cultism stronger. He knew that for him to be safe, and for the whole campus to be safe, everyone needed to work together and be ready. His meetings with other students became more serious. He focused on ways they could all stay safe together. He gave them very important advice. Be aware. Always look around you. If something looks strange, tell someone. Walk together. Never walk alone, especially when it's dark. Always go with friends. Share news. Keep talking to trusted friends. Tell each other about cult movements or any new threats. Talk to security. Keep working with a few trusted campus security guards. Give them any information, even if it meant dealing with guards who were sometimes slow or not fully on their side. He helped set up informal watch groups in the student hostels. In these groups, students promised to look out for each other. If something looked wrong, they would raise an alarm. These were small but important ways to fight back, bringing more and more students together. He spent many hours, often late at night, talking about how to stay safe, making everyone feel more hopeful, and reminding them of one big truth: their large numbers were their greatest power. He told them that the Black Axe might have weapons, but the students had the truth and their unity. He also started to guess what the cult would do next. He understood how they thought, their need to show power again, who they would likely attack, and how they would do it. He shared these ideas with his closest group, getting them ready for a possible attack. He explained that when a cult's pride is hurt, they often strike back in the most surprising ways. They needed to be ready for an attack on the whole anti-cult movement, especially on its most known leader, which was him. As the days passed, the whole campus waited nervously. The students against cultism, led by Afrika, felt like soldiers getting ready for a battle they knew was coming. The cult members, on the other hand, were carefully planning, choosing the perfect time and place. The peace on campus was very thin, like a fragile cover over a boiling pot of anger. Afrika, knowing he was the main target, did not try to run away or hide. He strongly believed that if he did, it would betray everything he stood for. It would also undo all the good work they had done. He kept walking his chosen path, a path of strong beliefs. He was getting ready for the final showdown, not with hand toys, but with his strong beliefs and the hope he gave to others. He knew his dedication was stronger than his fear, and he was ready for whatever would happen. The spirit of Obafemi Awolowo University, alive in Africa, was about to face its hardest test. He stood like a lone giant, against a wave of planned darkness, fully aware of the terrible price his courage might demand. My research reminds me that tragedy often strikes when we least expect it, or when we are lost in a moment of calm. For Afrika, at Obafemi Awolowo University, his last night as a free man was one filled with ordinary campus life, a quiet moment before the storm. The air on campus had been heavy with unspoken threats, but in his hostel room, with other students around, there was a temporary feeling of peace. It was a typical evening in the student hostel. The sounds of Obafemi Awolowo University life filled the air. Distant music from another block, the chatter of students walking by, the gentle hum of generators providing light. Afrika was in his room, or perhaps in a common area within his hostel block, surrounded by a few friends and fellow students. This was a familiar scene for him. Hostels were places of community, where students studied, talked, and shared their lives. On this particular night, the mood was calm. Students were busy with their evening routines. Some were bent over textbooks, studying for upcoming exams, their faces serious under the dim light of their reading lamps. Others were simply talking, sharing jokes, discussing the day's events, or making plans for the weekend. The usual buzz of student life filled the space. There might have been the smell of instant noodles cooking, or the faint scent of mosquito coils burning, creating a normal, everyday atmosphere. Afrika himself was likely engaged in an activity that showed his intelligent and thoughtful nature. Perhaps he was reading a book, not a textbook, but something philosophical or related to African history and culture, deepening his understanding of the very identity that gave him his nickname. Or he could have been quietly working on an anti-cult leaflet, carefully choosing his words to inspire hope and caution in equal measure. His presence, even in quietness, was comforting to those around him. He was a symbol of strength and intellect, even in these casual moments. No one in that hostel room, or in the entire block, truly knew the terror that was about to break through their walls. They were caught in the illusion of safety that everyday routines often provide. The threats from the Black Axe had been constant, but they had always been distant, vague, like dark clouds on the horizon. They hadn't fully imagined the storm would hit this night, in this place. The students around Afrika were relaxed, perhaps even laughing. They trusted the hostel walls, the idea that their shared space offered a kind of protection. They believed that even the cultists would hesitate before invading a place full of innocent students. This belief was about to be shattered in the most brutal way. Afrika, despite his constant vigilance, was also caught in this momentary peace. He was always aware, always observing, but even he could not predict the exact moment of the cult strike. His mind might have been busy with plans for future anti-cult rallies, or perhaps reflecting on the latest news from his family back home. He was still a human being, a student, and a son, caught in the everyday flow of life, even as demise silently closed in. The sounds from outside the hostel were normal. The rustling of leaves in the night breeze, the distant sound of a taxi, maybe a dog barking. There was no sudden, loud noise to warn them, no shouting that would tell them to run. The approach of the Black Axe was silent, hidden by the darkness of the night and the belief that the hostel was a safe zone. This quiet evening highlights the bitter contrast between what was and what was about to happen. Here were young people, full of life, with dreams of their own, sharing space with a hero. They were unaware that this shared peace was about to be violently ripped apart. The laughter, the quiet studying, the casual conversations. All these were the final, fleeting moments of normalcy. The presence of other students in the hostel was meant to be a comfort, a form of informal protection through numbers. They thought strength lay in being together. But this night would show them that even in a group, when facing a prepared, ruthless enemy, individuals could be helpless. Afrika himself, in his quiet moment, was still thinking about the future, about how to make Obafemi Awolowo University better, about defeating the darkness. He had no idea that his time was running out, that his dedication and courage would soon demand the ultimate sacrifice. The calm, warm glow of the hostel lights was about to be swallowed by a sudden darkness. The quiet chatter was about to be replaced by screams. The peace was about to shatter. My research shows that cult violence on campus is rarely random. It's often a planned, terrifying display of power. For Afrika, at Obafemi Awolowo University, the peaceful quiet of his hostel was shattered by an overwhelming attack. This was the moment the Black Axe Confraternity came for their revenge, and their target was clear. The calm of the hostel, where students had been studying and talking, was suddenly and violently broken. It was late at night, a time when most students were either deeply asleep or focused on their late-night studies. There was no gradual build-up, no warning shouts or distant alarms. The attack was sudden and surprising, like a thunderclap in a clear sky. A large group of cultists, the Black Axe Confraternity, burst into the hostel. They were a full squad, meaning many members, with various weapons. Their faces were often covered, or they were wearing clothes that made them look the same, hiding their identities. They moved with a terrifying speed and coordination, showing they had planned this attack very well. Their entry was loud and destructive. Doors were kicked open, windows were smashed, and the silence of the night was replaced by shouts and sounds of conflict. The students inside the hostel were caught completely off guard. They had been in their rooms, feeling safe. Now, they were in a nightmare. The sounds of breaking glass, the heavy thud of boots, and the angry, aggressive shouts of the cultists created instant panic. Fear, sharp and cold, shot through every student. Many jumped out of their beds, confused and terrified, not knowing what was happening or where to run. The cultists were not there to just cause general chaos. They had a clear mission. As they moved through the hostel, their shouts were aimed at finding one person, Afrika. They yelled his name, demanding to know where he was, pushing past other terrified students, knocking things over. Other students, seeing the sheer number of armed cultists, felt a deep sense of helplessness. They were unarmed, unprepared, and completely outnumbered. Their attempts to resist were weak and quickly crushed. Many huddled in corners, under beds, or behind doors, hoping not to be seen, praying for the nightmare to end. The air filled with cries of fear, panicked shouts, and the sounds of furniture being thrown aside. The cultists moved with purpose. They swept through rooms, pushing students aside, searching every corner. Their anger was like a physical force, pressing down on everyone. They were not just looking for Afrika. They were making a statement, showing everyone in the hostel, and by extension the entire university, that their power was absolute and their revenge would be merciless. The message was clear. Anyone who dared to stand against them would face a similar, terrifying fate. The other students, who had been inspired by Afrika's courage, were now forced to watch this terrible display. Their initial bravery and unity against cultism melted away under the immediate, overwhelming threat of the cultists' violence. They could do nothing but hide and tremble, wishing they could help, but utterly paralyzed by terror. The hostel, once a place of community and safety, became a prison of fear. The Black Axe's full squad was an unstoppable force in that moment. They were driven by pure hatred and the desire to erase the shame Afrika had caused them. They were not afraid of campus security, knowing that by the time any real help arrived, their mission would be completed. Their efficiency showed a chilling lack of humanity, focused only on their goal. Every single cultist moved with a cold precision, checking rooms, forcing students to reveal Afrika's location. The loud, aggressive searches, the rough handling of students, the smashing of property. All these actions contributed to the overwhelming sense of terror that gripped the hostel. The sounds of their heavy boots thudding on the floors, the scraping of weapons against walls, created a terrifying symphony of destruction. The moments stretched out, feeling like an eternity for the students trapped inside. Each passing second brought the cultists closer to their target, and closer to fulfilling their dark mission. The air grew thick with dust, the metallic tang of fear, and the chilling promise of bloodshed. The invasion was complete, and the stage was set for the tragic, inevitable end of Afrika's brave fight. My research into what happens when cults take revenge always shows a cruel truth. The stronger the challenge, the harsher the cult's answer. For Afrika, at Obafemi Awolowo University, the terrible invasion of his hostel was not just a threat. It was the Black Axe Confraternity's final, brutal act of revenge, and it took his life. Amidst the shouts and fear inside the hostel, the cultists finally found Afrika. He was surrounded. Maybe he was trying to hide, or maybe he faced them with his brave heart when they broke into his room or found him in a common area. When the Black Axe members, with their covered faces and weapons, saw him, their loud shouts stopped. A chilling quietness filled the air. Everyone in the hostel seemed to freeze, all eyes on Afrika. The other students, still hiding in fear, watched this awful moment. They saw their hero, the man who had given them hope, now caught by his hitmen. A deep sadness and hopelessness washed over them. They wanted to scream or help, but their throats were tight with fear. Their bodies felt heavy and useless. All they could do was watch, their eyes wide with horror, as the terrible scene happened. The air in the hostel felt heavy with fear and the silent knowledge of what was about to happen. Then, without another word, the cultists moved. The attack was fast, heartless, and very deliberate. It was not a confused, messy fight. It was an execution. Afrika, the smart and brave leader, was caught in a sudden, overwhelming attack by many men. He had no chance to fight back, no way to run away. The speed and power of the cultists left him completely helpless. This was the end of Afrika. The bright hope he had brought to Obafemi Awolowo University, the courage he had inspired, was suddenly and violently put out. His life, so full of promise and bravery, was took quickly in a terrible show of cult power. The quietness that came after the attack was even scarier than the noise before it. It was a silence filled with the weight of demise, a silence that screamed of pure evil. The cultists did not stay long. As soon as they finished their terrible deed, they quickly left the hostel. They disappeared back into the night, just as suddenly as they had appeared. Their job was done. They left behind a scene of pure horror, a damaged hostel, scared students, and Afrika's body. The message they left was loud and clear, told through the brutal execution of a hero. No one who stands against the Black Axe will live. They wanted to destroy any remaining hope. They wanted to make sure that fear would once again rule the campus. They wanted to prove that their power was total, and that fighting them would always lead to the worst possible end. The students who saw this, or those who were hiding nearby, would remember this awful night forever. They had seen pure evil, and they had seen their brave leader fall. This act was a crushing blow to the anti-cult movement. It was a terrible defeat that filled Obafemi Awolowo University with deep fear. The cult had taken a life, and in doing so, they had tried to take the very spirit of courage and hope. My research into cult violence shows that after such an act, there is often a terrible silence, a void where justice should be. For Afrika, at Obafemi Awolowo University in 1999, his brave fight ended led to his downfall, and the morning after, the Black Axe Confraternity appeared to have won. The sun rose over Obafemi Awolowo University the next morning, but it brought no light to the hearts of the students. The news of Afrika's demise spread like a cold, terrible sickness across the campus. Students woke up to whispers that quickly became horrified shouts. The hostel where Afrika lived was now a scene of utter devastation. Broken doors, smashed furniture, and the chilling evidence of the scene. Many students were filled with tears, anger, and utter disbelief. How could this happen? How could someone so good, so brave, be taken away like this? The air was thick with grief, but underneath it lay a chilling layer of fear. The Black Axe had made their statement loud and clear. Defy them, and you pay the ultimate price. The hope Afrika had so carefully built was now struggling to breathe under the weight of this new, terrifying reality. Campus security and the police did arrive, but they came too late. The cultists had already melted back into the shadows of the night, leaving no easy traces. The investigation that followed was slow and difficult. The Black Axe operated in deep secrecy. Their members were loyal through fear, meaning no one dared to speak up, even if they knew who was involved. The few students who had witnessed it were too terrified to give clear descriptions or identify anyone. They knew that speaking out would mean facing the same fate as Afrika. Despite the outrage from students and a few brave lecturers, the initial police investigation seemed to lead nowhere. Days turned into weeks, but no major arrests were made directly. The cultists, feeling powerful and untouchable, remained hidden. The system that was supposed to protect students seemed unable to bring justice to Afrika. This lack of immediate action sent a terrible message. The cults were powerful. The painful truth emerged. Nothing immediately happened to the members of the Black Axe Confraternity who carried out the attack. They got away clean. This outcome was a crushing blow to the anti-cult movement. It was a dark testament to the power of fear and the deep roots of cultism within the university system and society. In the immediate aftermath, it felt like the Black Axe had won. They had taken off their strongest enemy. They had re-established their dominance through the most violent act possible. The campus was plunged into a deeper, more chilling fear than ever before. Students were scared to speak up, scared to gather, scared to even whisper about cultism. The anti-cult movement, so vibrant under Afrika's leadership, fell into disarray. Its members, brave but now deeply traumatized, felt helpless and defeated. The cult's message was understood by everyone. Challenge us, and we will take you out, and no one will stop us. This was their ultimate show of force, a strict warning to anyone who dared to dream of a cult-free Obafemi Awolowo University. The campus, which Afrika had worked so hard to purify, was now once again shrouded in the thick, suffocating blanket of cult control. Afrika's downfall, meant to be a symbol of their victory, instead became a permanent scar on the history of Obafemi Awolowo University. It was a tragic end for a brave soul, and a chilling reminder of the heavy cost of fighting for what is right when evil is so deeply rooted and unchallenged. The story of George Akinyemi Awilade, Afrika, is a painful but vital lesson. He was a brilliant, brave, and good young man, loved by many. He dedicated his life to fighting for a better, safer campus. But he paid the ultimate price for his courage. His downfall is a stark reminder of the dark reality of cultism. The cults, like the Black Axe, use fear, violence, and intimidation to control. They do not offer true brotherhood or power. They offer destruction and despair. In the short term, they might seem to win, silencing opposition through brutality. But their victory comes at the cost of innocent lives and leaves a legacy of trauma and injustice. To all students, the message from Afrika's tragic life is clear: avoid cultism at all costs. The path of violence and fear leads only to destruction, for individuals and for communities. Afrika's courage should inspire us, but his fate should warn us. We must never forget the heavy cost of cultism, and we must continue to fight for justice and peace, honoring the memory of heroes like Afrika. His spirit of resistance, though silenced, should never be forgotten. This content is for educational purposes only.